Welcome back to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
And my name is Paul Ogden. You know, Mark, one thing I like about this show is that the topic of baseball, we finally have you and George acting or talking sense. Because normally when we talk politics in the bar that we occasionally frequent, you guys are so left-wing and so radical. And so far, I think we've had a lot of agreement. Maybe that will change this segment.
I think it quite possibly will, this segment. Before we get into baseball, just want to point out we're here at Big Hat Books in Broad Ripple. It's on the north side of Indianapolis, where you can get books like How Much Do You Really Know About the Indianapolis 500 by Donald Davidson. That's a foreword by Donald Davidson, and books by Pat Kennedy. And this is spring. This is Indianapolis. The 500 is held in May. Also, the first weekend in May is the Indianapolis Mini Marathon.
And I understand you're going to be participating in it.
It's a 13.1 half marathon, 13.1 mile half marathon. This will be my 14th consecutive, and we're going to be live streaming from the course. So that will be a fun thing. But let's get back to baseball. Let's talk about the Hall of Fame.
Mark, I will not go to the Hall of Fame until they let Pete Rose in.
You will not.
I will not go to the Hall of Fame until they let Pete Rose in. I know that the Hall of Fame people that run the place are not necessarily responsible for what was done to Pete Rose, but I think it's a shame. Man has more hits than anyone else in history. He was not accused of betting when he was a player, only when he was a manager, and he was a terrible manager. But he was one heck of a ball player. He is. A lot of people grew up watching him and running to first base on walks and sliding head first. And he's a great player.
A couple of things. One, I believe that Shoeless Joe Jackson ought to be in the Hall of Fame.
And he was during your era.
I'm sorry?
You remember him growing up, correct?
I'm a little deep. He was a hell of a great ball player. Watched Field of Dreams, but he ought to be in the Hall of Fame. And I think part of Pete Rose's problem is being that he's such an ass that he alienates people. But if that's the case, we were talking before the segment. Ty Cobb would never have made it into the Hall of Fame.
Ty Cobb was a sociopath.
Well, Ty Cobb, a couple of things. One, the total number of former teammates of his that attended his funeral, zero. Also, one time there was a rookie for the Yankees who got into a fight on the field, caused both benches to clear. Ruth went out and was able to pull Ty Cobb's jersey up over his head and break one of Ty Cobb's ribs. And the rookie was fined $500, which was a lot of money back then, for having caused the incident that cleared the bench. Ruth paid the fine and said, thanks, I've always wanted to be able to do that to Ty Cobb. But, the question is then, what constitutes the basis for people being in the Hall of Fame?
Personality doesn't. So I'm going to agree, as much as he might have been somebody abrasive, he earned the right.
You're talking about Rose.
I am talking about Pete Rose now. But, I keep looking. We're talking state of baseball, too, and I'm looking at Hall of Fame. What other sport has the all-time hits leader banned, the home run leader banned? We've got...
I don't think Bonds has been banned yet.
Well,
No, but he's going to have a hard time overcoming.
Oh, absolutely.
Same thing with Roger Clemens.
But that raises that question. What is it then? Because obviously, if the Hall of Fame is performance-based, as it should be, and overlooking all else, you're absolutely right. Rose should be in. Bonds would be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Roger Clemens would be the same way. It's a moving target, and it's very interesting. Part of the discussion we had during the break too was the fact that, it used to be automatic, virtually automatic. If you had 3,000 hits in your career, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. As players last longer and deeper into their careers, maybe not so much. 500 home runs was always a standard. Now the question is it 600? Where does it go? And again, tainted by the steroid era, home runs may be discounted a great deal. I mean, you look at someone like Jim Thome, who, again, 600 plus home runs in his career, to the best of everyone's knowledge, played his entire career clean. Is he a Hall of Famer? He was demonstrably a great ball player for a number of years, but I don't know, honestly, if he should be in the Hall of Fame for the 600 home runs, but for overall performance and overall career, that's kind of a tough call.
But then look at somebody like Clemens. Clemens was a hell of a great ball player before he started juicing up.
Well, I'm going to cast aspersions here, and it's going to be a Bud Selig because he allowed this. It's under Bud Selig's watch that all this occurred, and he turned a blind eye towards that. He thought that was good for baseball, and now look what that's wrought.
Sure.
That is not.
He had to bring fans back after the strike. The home run chase between McGuire and Sosa was a huge moment for baseball and drew a lot of fans back in.
But it was a quick fix, and now look.
Yeah.
And there was a front cover story on Sports Illustrated, and I think it was like in 98 or 99, about steroids in baseball. Maybe it was 97. And it said 90% of the players in Major League Baseball were using steroids. And it's the front page of Sports Illustrated. And it was describing how a kid that was a shortstop said, well, the pitcher will come around, the starter that day will come around and say, are you juiced up? Because the pitcher's depending upon these players to be able to hit. And everybody was aware of it, and then when the scandal kind of broke, Selig and all the others act like it's such a surprise. Gosh, you mean these players are taking drugs? Baseball players have been taking performance-enhancing substances since the 1890s, when some of them were taking goat hormones, thinking that was going to enhance their play.
You and I disagreed off the air about this. Steroids are in a totally different classification in terms of making people bigger, making people stronger. I don't think speed, which a lot of players did take. Jim Bouton's book,
Ball 4, talking about greenies.
Greenies. I don't think that quite falls in the same category as steroids. So I think it's much worse.
So you think that amphetamines are okay, but the steroids...
No, he didn't say they were okay.
Are you on record saying that, sir?
But steroids makes people much larger. I didn't bring the stats with me. I looked at the size of the 76 Yankees versus the 2007 Yankees.
And both teams were evil.
And they were both evil, but the 2007 Yankees, the players were on average 30 pounds heavier, 2 inches taller. The 1976 Yankees, almost every outfielder was under 6 foot, under 200 pounds. And you go to 2007, almost all of them are taller than 6 foot, over 200 pounds. I don't think it was a single player. The size of the players has changed.
But ironically, that's across the board. I mean, back in the 70s, you had guys like Freddie Patek, who was 5 foot 5 inches tall, playing with the Kansas City Royals, and you had smaller players, as you did in hockey, as you did in football, as you did in basketball, and now, I mean, you could probably make that same type of roster comparison in any of the major sports, and it would probably be very similar. I'm not sure that it's just steroids. I think it's the evolution of the game. Kids are bigger, stronger, faster, and across the board, I mean, I just think that athleticism has taken over. It's tough to be the little guy anymore.
Well, we've had several major sea changes in the history of baseball. I know that the women's leagues for a while were proliferating, and those kind of didn't go very far. But there was an entire...
You're talking about the women's baseball league that formed during the World War II.
Right. But then the Negro leagues, what they were called, baseball really didn't have racial discrimination for a period of time after the Civil War. During the 1870s, it was integrated. There was no problem at all. And then there was discrimination that arose, and African Americans were not allowed to play baseball. And so African Americans developed leagues that were parallel to the leagues in which European descent people could play. Exceptions were made for Cubans. So they would try to get African Americans in saying that they were Cubans, because that presumably was somehow different. That was huge when Jackie Robinson came and played for Brooklyn. It was a huge break in baseball. But today, Coach was talking about the percentage of African American players in baseball.
I just read a report from Huffington Report that said American blacks is what they broke it down by. 8%, it was 8.1% of Major League Baseball players are American black. But they contrasted that with hockey, where nearly 8% of hockey is black. Now they're also throwing in Canadian blacks there, but I think that's telling that the sport is losing out to the African American.
Well, I think it's opportunity. I mean, I think it's tough. If you're an urban black, it's tough to find places to play, programs to be involved in. Whether you develop a love for the game or not is largely contingent upon playing it, being involved in it as a kid. And I just think the opportunity is the difficulty.
And back to seeing the game, we're right back to the beginning when we were talking about the late games. I do think that's going to be bringing people back if they're able to see the game.
Well, and I think when a kid can't afford to buy a glove, and that's an important
big part of it, yes,
to have for the game. But then I was thinking about this the other night, and we had talked about doing this show today weeks ago on baseball because it started this season. And when I was editor of the law school newspaper, I got in trouble for doing a baseball edition because people thought it was inappropriate for law school yesterday. But I was thinking the other night, we're talking about how we should try and obtain resources for poor kids to get ball gloves and bats and balls to be able to learn how to play baseball at the same time as schools are being cut in their budgets for books and teachers. And I just want to put this in perspective. I'm not saying it's hunky-dory that we're cutting education, let's beef up baseball, but I think that's one aspect when you're looking at a sport that requires equipment that kids, if they're underprivileged, aren't going to be able to afford.
This comes back to George's point. Major League Baseball needs to be doing a little. They can afford that. They could help communities. I know they do some things, but they could do it.
They need to be a great deal more proactive than they are.
It could be on a much grander scale.
Well, the Los Angeles Dodgers were just purchased for $2 billion. There's a lot of money there floating around, and the owners get to make all the money off of, your home team makes off of 81 games a year, toss in the playoffs, because these communities in Florida and Arizona are outbidding each other trying to get spring training teams. The home field for a major league team for spring training there. So there's a lot of money there to work with. We're getting to the end of this segment. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.